Welcome to another episode of the Film Florida podcast. My name is John Lux, and I'm the Executive Director of Film Florida. Thanks for downloading this episode of the podcast. We have a great guest for you today. Before I introduce you to our guest, if you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the Film Florida podcast. If you're not already a member, please consider joining Film Florida at filmflorida.org. And finally, we have a Film Florida merchandise page. Check it out at teespring.com/stores/Film Florida to purchase Film Florida t-shirts, sweatshirts, and coffee mugs. Sean Baker is an award-winning writer, producer, director, and editor. His projects include Four Letter Words, Takeout, Tangerine, and of course, the Florida Project. We talk about his start in the industry, wearing many hats on projects, and details about the Florida Project. Here's my conversation with Sean Baker. Thanks for joining us on the Film Florida podcast, Sean.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start at the beginning. How and why did you get your start in the industry?
Well, it took me a while to break into the industry, and I think I'm still breaking into the industry. However, I just have I have had an affinity for cinema since a very early age. My mother introduced me to it by bringing me to the local library where I saw James Whale's Frankenstein and wanted to make movies ever since. So I did the stereotypical thing that a lot of kids did in the 80s, where I went from Super 8 to VHS, and then I was the AV geek in high school and edited the video yearbook, knowing that eventually I would go to film school, which I did. I went to NYU, Tisch School of the Arts for undergrad, and have been making independent films ever since.
And do you remember what your first real job was in the industry and how you got it?
Does film projectionist count? Besides being a manager and a projectionist at like a local one-screen little cinema that's gone now in New Jersey. But besides that, after school, immediately after NYU, I was fortunate enough to land a job at a small publishing company, which allowed me to run their AV department, which allowed me to shoot a commercial for them. On 16 millimeter film. It really allowed me to cut my teeth, and I wasn't signed with an agent, but it allowed me to get a few more commercials under my belt, build a reel, and that led to me saving up enough money to shoot my first feature film. So I guess you could say it was working at that publishing company that really helped me so much get into the industry.
And when you look back on your career, besides the obvious of, making this film or that film, is there a key project or pivotal event that kind of shaped your career or something that kind of changed everything for you?
I'm not sure. There have been so many of those moments where I can look at where I can say, if I did not make that decision, or if that decision was not made for me, I would not be in the position I am in now. So I think the fact that my first film, even though it did gain some exposure, it went to South by Southwest, it got a small DVD release. This is a film called Four Letter Words, a very personal little social realist film that's about white dudes in the suburbs hanging out. It was very autobiographical. It stemmed from me watching and absorbing conversations with my friends growing up. So this was my first film, and I put my own money into it. It got out there, but it wasn't exactly like it wasn't in any way a breakout. So I think it was in that time in my late 20s, right after I had made that film, before I made my second film, Takeout, which I co-directed, there was a maturing process there, and there was lots of life experience there. And I think that that's so important. When filmmakers ask me, what's the number one thing that they need to do in order to prepare, in order to be a filmmaker, I'm saying get life experience, be in relationships, see the world. And I think that in those years, between 96 and 2003, when I made Takeout, there was a maturing process, and my sensibility changed and my focus changed. And I think I was more interested in the world and in current and in politics and in current events. And that's what led me to make Takeout. And I think ever since then, my focus has been on making films that hopefully have a positive change, that shed a light on important issues of our times.
Well, you mentioned Takeout, and that was your second film, as you mentioned, and it was accepted to Slamdance, which is an amazing accomplishment for your second film after your first film going to South by Southwest. So talk about that film a little bit and how important it was for both of those to get accepted into prestigious places so earlier in your career.
Yeah, well, I've learned the hard way that festival strategy is an extremely important thing for a filmmaker. I had to understand the hierarchy. I had to understand that you should premiere your film at the highest status, most respected film festivals out there. It's the way to in many ways ensure a long life for your film. It also is a way to hopefully get the best distribution and the highest paying distribution deal. So these two festivals, I really think, doing South by first and doing Slamdance next, and then after that, really realizing how to, navigate the festival circuit, especially overseas. And this is something in which I by the time I got to Prince of Broadway, I was focused on, having a very strong international premiere, which was at Locarno in Switzerland. And from that point on, it's really been one of the most important goals with these films to premiere properly at a big festival. And then you can roll out your film after that.
And over the next number of years after Takeout, you were involved in a number of film and television projects. But I want to jump ahead to Tangerine. And it received a lot of attention for the subject matter, but also the technical style. And for those that aren't aware, you shot the entire film on iPhone 5Ss. So the first question is why? And the second question is, did it ever bother you that the camera used sometimes got more attention than the actual content of the film?
You know how they say even bad PR is good PR, right? Or bad publicity is good publicity. And so I never saw it as a hindrance in any way. But my only concern was that it would be seen as a stunt, which it definitely was not. I mean, it stemmed from economic reasons. I mean, we had such a low budget. Usually filmmakers, they get a bigger budget with every film, right? They work up. I was actually working backwards. My budget was slashed by more than half on Tangerine than it was from my film before, Starlet. So I was in a place where I had a cap on what we could spend. There's no way we could have gone over budget. We were given exactly $100,000. So I had to figure out a way to do this. And I looked at the camera department first, and it just happened to be a perfect time in history because the new iPhone had just come out. It was a major technological step forward from the iPhone 5. The iPhone 5S was shooting in HD. There were certain tools that were third-party tools that started to arrive on the scene that helped shoot on the iPhone 5S properly. And I'm talking about the Filmic Pro app, which allows you to manually control the camera. And then I used anamorphic lenses designed by this company called Moondog Labs that had just, they were in prototype stage. So I shot on one of their prototypes. So it just happened to be the perfect time. Now, I had to take advantage of that moment, but at the same time, as a filmmaker, you know that ultimately content is king, and so you have to actually ask yourself, well, what is this? What is this technology? What is this camera? What is this new medium? How does it complement your content? Because that's the most important thing. Is it taking away from it? Is it? And so, but I ultimately decided that, no, it's not. It's going to only enhance. With a film like Tangerine, I was able to shoot clandestinely. I was able to shoot stuff that I never would have been able to shoot if I had a bigger crew. And I'm talking even a DSLR-sized crew. That would have added too many people on board for me to, number one, pay, and number two, to shoot in the shooting style we did. And then on top of that, we started looking at this sort of the rough and ready style look that the iPhone brought to the table. And we really thought that it complemented, this sort of street level realism that we were going for with the film. So ultimately, one complemented the other, and it all worked out. There was no stunt behind it. It was literally just like, it seemed like just the right time to do it. Now, there's one thing I should say about this whole thing. While we were shooting, I was extremely nervous. I felt like, oh, this is amateur hour. We're stepping backwards. This is not going to be accepted. But then my producer, Shi-Ching Zhou, who I co-directed Takeout with, by the way, she's always been wonderful in terms of just grounding this and making me open my eyes a little bit. And she said, it doesn't matter what camera you're shooting on. You have to ultimately make this the best content possible. And mass audiences, general audiences will look past any of the perhaps technical differences they see from this and a mainstream, and a studio film. And she reminded me that my favorite film, that I've always said, one of my favorite films is Lars von Trier's The Idiots, which is a Dogma 95 film shot on consumer mini DV tape and transferred to film. So, that made me see the light a little bit. And I ended up going to Sundance. We kept it under wraps. We did not want to, announce to the audience beforehand that this was shot on the iPhone 5S. We showed the film, we premiered it, and in the end credits, it said shot entirely on the iPhone 5S, and there was a nice little gasp, through the audience, and that was almost exactly what we were looking for. We want it to be an afterthought. We don't want it to be the focus.
Now, when I look at your credits, Sean, on IMDb, and honestly, I wasn't aware of this part of it until I did some research. You truly are a writer, producer, director, editor. I mean, a lot of people say that, but you truly are. It's not just a credit here or a credit there. You do all of those things all of the time. Talk about the pros and cons of wearing all of those hats on a project.
Well, for me, the editing side of it is something I can answer quite quickly here. For me, I'm an editor at heart. And for me, editing is 50% of my directing. So I know that doesn't apply to all directors, obviously. I don't think I would have my signature on a film unless I edited it as well. It's something that, that's where in post-production is where I really find the film. And I find the pace and the style, everything in post. So editing is a must for me. Now, regarding, the writing, these are stories that I'm passionate about. So I don't really think of myself as like a writer, maybe first and foremost. I think of myself as a director. These stories are coming from places in which where my interests lie. And so I feel I must be a part of the writing. So the pros is that, ultimately I feel at the very end of these projects that it truly is my baby, it is my story that I'm telling in my way, which can also be extremely frustrating because all the blame falls on me, right?
Right.
So I beat myself up a lot. Trust me, I beat myself up a lot. But the pros, the pro is basically that it's my signature. It's my story, right? But then the con can be the time that it takes. Literally, right. It takes me about 3 times the length that it takes a director who does not write and edit to make a film. So that's why I'm almost falling 4 years between every film, because before the writing process, the films require years of research, or sometimes, months of research. But in the case of the film I'm working on now, I'm already a year and a half, if not more, a year and a half into research before the writing has even begun. So it is time, you have to worry about that, because you have to be conscious of it, because, audiences can forget about you. You are right. You are putting out a product based on your name, especially these small independent films in which they don't really rely on stars. They're more well, my last one, Willem Dafoe, was on it, so that was a completely different thing. But still, they're looking at it as a Sean Baker film, and people are starting to forget about you after about 2 years. So that's a con.
So, Sean, obviously, one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast was to talk about the Florida Project, and you just kind of alluded to it. So what's the backstory on that film, and where did the concept and desire to make the film come from?
Well, for the last 3 films, I've been working with a co-writer by the name of Chris Bergosh, and we went to NYU together. And he understands my sensibility. He sort of looks out for the stories that he thinks I would be interested in. At the same time, he also truly does have an affinity for Disney, meaning the films and the Disney culture. He's enamored by it, I must say. He knows everything Disney, and he literally just brought the story to my attention about the hidden homeless population that resides outside of Walt Disney World in Kissimmee and parts of Orlando. There have been a few news articles written about it. So he sent them my way, and I started researching and thought, oh, this is actually quite interesting. And I always wanted to make a film that focused on children, having been a very big fan of the Little Rascals and the Our Gang series from the 20s and 30s. So this is something I wanted to try, and this seemed to be again, a socially conscious film in which I knew nothing about the hidden homeless situation in the United States. I'd never even heard of the term hidden homeless until this news article came my way. And the very fact that I didn't know about it, well, I wanted to learn more about it. And I thought audiences could use some light being shed on this subject. And that's really how it all began. We then, moved forward in the way that we always move forward. We got a small grant from a beautiful nonprofit by the name of Cinereach, located in New York City, and they help small films like this get off the ground. This allowed us to take trips to Orlando and Kissimmee and spend time there and get to know people there and understand the situation. And then suddenly there was a sort of a ground rush to make it happen in the summer of 2016, because if not, we were going to be waiting for a whole other year because we wanted to shoot while children were out of school. And so then suddenly I wound up finding myself shooting in July 2016 in sunny Orlando and Kissimmee.
So, Sean, let's talk a little bit about the casting in the film. It was a great mix of well-known talent like Willem Dafoe, as you mentioned, and a slew of less-known local actors, most notably Brooklyn Prince and Christopher Rivera. Talk about the casting process on that film and how important it was to have authenticity in your characters.
Well, first off, thank you very much. I'm really happy with this cast. It was what I normally do, where I try to mix first-timers with some non-professionals and then bring in a very, established and seasoned actor here or there. And that's what we did with this one. And I also wanted to cast locally as much as possible for authenticity's sake. And also I wanted the children to be local. I didn't want to have them travel in from another state and feel so displaced and feel so, I wanted them to feel at home. And I wanted them to know that they were going home at night. These little children were giving it their all, and it was their summer. So I didn't want to completely destroy their summer. But anyway, I worked with an incredible local casting company by the name of CrowdShot, and Patty Wiley, who works with them, and she really helped us in so many ways. She found us Brooklyn Prince. She found us Christopher Rivera. I did some street casting myself. So I was the one who found Valeria Cotto at the local Target store in Kissimmee. And then we had a nice casting call for a lot of the supporting actors, and ultimately just very, very happy with my cast. Now, Willem Dafoe and Caleb Landry Jones, and Macon Blair were probably and I'm sorry, one more person, Karan Karagulian, were the four that we brought in from out of state, and they blended in wonderfully. Willem took the time. He really took his time to understand the situation in Florida, and came in early before production and got to meet some of the motel managers that helped inspire his character. He went off on his own. He found his own jewelry, he asked to have those glasses that he wears in the film. We got him to get a spray tan to start really getting into character. And months later, when we were in post-production in New York City, and our wonderful colorist, Sam Daly, was sitting in front of us coloring the film on the big screen, about halfway through our 2-week session, he turned around and looked at us and he goes, guys, I am from Florida. And at that point, we of cringed. We were wondering what he was going to say. And he pointed up to the big screen where there was the shot of Willem Dafoe there and talking to the cranes. And he goes, and that is a Florida man. And the fact that when he said that, it was like the biggest compliment because, for Willem, because, Willem completely embodied what he considered, an accurate portrayal of a middle-aged Floridian. I think that just says it all. Willem is transformative and can become somebody else just by taking the time. So overall, this is one of my favorite casts from all my films, and I think it was just a really nice mix of people from different backgrounds and different levels of experience.
So you finished the Florida project, the post-production part of it, and there starts to be some buzz. At what point did you know this wasn't just another film and this was going to be a bigger story and a bigger thing for you and your career?
It's hard to say if that ever kicked in. I don't know. I don't even know. I do know that, getting accepted into Cannes was a major thing for me, especially as a filmmaker. This is a life goal of mine to screen at Cannes. We were in the Director's Fortnight section, and this is a section that is near and dear to my heart because some of my favorite films of all time have premiered in this section, from, I think, Bad Lieutenant to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? So across the board, just really incredible movies. And I think it was at that moment that I realized that this could go all the way. Where my other films, they did get, they got attention, and they got, especially critically, they were well accepted. But we always had an issue with international distribution, and this time we were able to sell most territories that were sellable. So it was really, in terms of exposure, a whole different level. And I think I figured that out when we were at Cannes.
And then Willem got nominated for an Academy Award.
He did. And this was something that, for me, just gravy. It was a cherry on top. I thought this film was way too, I'm not going to say independent, but I am going to say a little bit, I don't think the style is very mainstream, right? Not perhaps
Sure.
There's certain parts of the style that I would say wouldn't be so audience friendly. So I never really thought that this film was going to go past the Independent Spirit Awards or Gotham Awards sort of recognition to all the way to the Academy. So it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I'm very happy for Willem and very proud.
And you had some really nice things to say about your Florida-based casting crew. Talk a little bit about that. I actually found a quote on Twitter, and what you said was, it was an honor to shoot in your beautiful state with a wonderful Florida crew. So talk a little bit about your time here in Florida.
I would love to, because I've since shot 2 more times in Florida on commercials, and I just love your crews. They're so professional, so down to earth. I could name a million names, but just off the top of my head, Fernando Rodriguez, who is costume design, my wonderful camera department. We had a wonderful key grip by the name of Pat Ming, the Steadicam guys out of Miami, just incredible artists. We have Ozzy Silvera Jr., and we have Mike McGowan, just wonderful artists and real skilled craftsmen. So I could just list off everyone I loved working with, but I just have to say that it was just an honor to work with them. And they also, I have to say, we had never worked before, and I have to just thank them for their patience. I was throwing them curveballs like you wouldn't believe, because again, I'm a little bit different with my shooting style, and I'm used to smaller crews. This is probably the biggest crew that I had outside of commercials. So for me, to understand how to communicate, it was a big learning lesson for me. And the crew was so patient and so loving. So I really just I miss them. I truly miss them. And if they're listening right now, I want to just say hi and I love you guys.
Well, and I'm sure all of them would welcome you back. The next time you want to do a project in Florida, there'd be no problem with that. So what are you up to these days? I mean, when and where can the audience see something from you?
Well, I'm in development. I'm currently finally writing. And my hope is that I have something out in 2021. Again, you can see how long this takes, and trust me, if there was a way I could shave down time, I would. But I would say that the next film, you could expect more of the same, and it's in the same wheelhouse. It's tackling a political issue that I'm very passionate about, and within a community that I think is very underrepresented. And I don't really want to say much more because I don't want to, jinx myself or set expectations. But I am looking forward to shooting with my same cinematographer, Alexis Zabe, who shot Florida Project. And hopefully getting the cameras rolling soon.
Well, Sean, I really appreciate you making the time in your schedule to talk to us. And thanks for being on the Film Florida podcast.
Thank you so much. Can I just say one more thing?
Please.
You can see right now there's a true, I would say there's a handful of filmmakers out there who are truly seeing, the value of shooting in Florida. You guys have an incredible state. It's so visual and it's so unique. And depending on what city you are, you have just such an eclectic mix of people there. They're just beautiful, wonderful human beings. And so you can see from like the filmmakers like Harmony Korine and Trey Schultz, who did Waves, and of course Barry Jenkins, who made Moonlight. We would love to shoot more in Florida. And I think that if the state helps with, a tax incentive that really will help bring lots of films back to the state, I think that would be an incredible thing because, we are itching to shoot more in Florida. We really are.
Sean, I couldn't have said it better myself, and I promise you we are working extremely hard to make that happen because we know folks like you want to come here. It's a business, and you got to get the best value for your dollar, and sometimes that's in other states right now, but we want to bring you guys back to Florida. So I appreciate you saying that.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Film Florida podcast. For more information about Film Florida, go to filmflorida.org or visit our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Check out the Film Florida merchandise at teespring.com/stores/Film Florida, and please remember to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast.